Interesting. Recently, I was discussing with a friend. So it sounds to me like the summary of what I read is that um, the author argues that aristocratic tutoring is at least one of the proven methods to produce geniuses. As a result, as someone who's young who's looking to learn, it appears that um, it is in the expert's best interest to actually find someone and tutor or mentor them because they may not initially become a genius, quote unquote, or someone who performs a lot, but through this mentoring or mentorship, this may happen. For example, one of the aristocrats was tutored by their brother. Yes, Bertrand Russell's older brother introduced him to geometry at age 11, and it was one of the great events of my life as dazzling as first love. So then it says, is it really solely his innate genetic facility, or was mathematics colored by the love of his older brother? So yeah, they believe the argument is that tutoring actually induces these geniuses. But let me read a bit more and see. Okay, what about Einstein? I see most school stuff is exaggerated for Einstein. He had multiple tutors growing up in mathematics and philosophy, such as his uncle, who taught him algebra. Oh, had a great tutor, introducing Albert to geometry very early on. Prefacing young Albert's eventual transformation of our understanding of space and time into something geometric. So it's very valuable to, I guess, be tutored by some sort of expert early on in subject fields that you believe could lead to contributions in the future, or worse, even so you can tutor others too. Maybe we don't make Einsteins anymore because we don't make Max Talmuds anymore, where Max Talmud was one of the best tutors ever. But he's just still arguing about it. Let me see. Oh, he says, I'm certainly not saying that aristocratic tutoring is the only path to genius. There's a few people like Ramanujan, whose father was a clerk and who was one of the greatest mathematical minds at all time, though I'll note briefly that his home did lodge college students who it's been suggested may have acted as informal tutors. Okay, so learning from people who know more than you, who are better than you at XYZ is a form of tutoring. Some geniuses weren't tutored, although verifying in absence is surprisingly difficult. Yeah. Detailed biographies. Certainly, though, it appears that would-be genius children had extremely abnormal amounts of one-on-one time with intellectually inclined adults who often introduced them to advanced topics far beyond their age. Interesting. So maybe the introduction of topics far beyond their age is valuable. Once you begin looking, tutors pop up like mushrooms around historical geniuses. The traditional line for why essentially all intellectuals used to be aristocrats. So it's like important to be in the space class. Is that they were the only people with leisure time to pursue the life of the mind. But what if it was never solely about leisure, but also a style of education that has fallen out of favor? The traditional line of why essentially all intellectuals used to be aristocrats is that they were the only people with leisure. Education. For the decrease in genius, sure, it does seem to coincide with the end of aristocracy. Europe looms large in the history of geniuses, and for that reasons, but perhaps it's also centuries-long traditions tutored aristocracies. And this stretched quite late into the modern age. Both were basically John von Neumann and Bertrand Russell were basically aristocrats. So tutoring is good. That's why to apply to these things, people want to mentor young people who have a fascination or passion for like learning. They were relics and anachronisms in a century that was shamefully and rapidly moving away from their kind in the instrumental world. Now consider such current situation, despite all the language professing otherwise. In general, the education system in the United States is basically based entirely on genetic determinism. A child is born assuming to have innate traits, including, for example, a preference to what they want to be when they grow up somehow just waiting fully formed inside of their 6-year-old selves. Then they are thrown into the school system of competitive academic meritocracy, wrapped in an obtuse hierarchical bureaucracy, a structure in which they will spend most of their young adult life forced to learn mostly from the peers who know as little as they do, exactly like your peers know as little as they do. That's the point. Your peers know as little as you do. So being around mature people will be very helpful. You can also show that your willingness to work, and mature people will be willing to sit through. Anyways, those who can sit through it are given drugs until they can. If they happen to test well or their parents spend the money, they might end up in slightly smaller classes and with slightly better teachers and with slightly smarter peers, but the structure will be the same. The first real intellectuals that most children meet in person are their college professors, already at 18 and stuck in a class with dozens of other people. Even at Harvard, introductory courses are often in the hundreds. Yeah, is it any surprise that such methods don't reliably produce geniuses? It's not, and not, it's not, is it not anathema to how humans normally become interested in things? Anathema, let's look up the word. So anathema means abhorrent or cursed. So something or someone that vehemently dislikes. So is it not anathema curse to how humans normally become interested in things? We sequester children from great minds, and perhaps it's worth briefly noting that we also sequester great minds from children. Interesting. Today, tutoring is mostly seen as a corrective to failures within the bureaucratic structures of education, like an intervention to help out course grade or tests. In general, those doing well in school don't get tutoring. It's like we're applying the secret genius sauce only the kids who aren't going to be geniuses. Might technology swoop in to rescue once more? Perhaps aristocratic tutoring doesn't have to be solely for aristocrats. The recent research has shown 2 sigma effective tutoring using AI tutors compared to traditional online courses. Perhaps in the future, once could imagine personalized AI governance and AI tutors. But by then, will we even need human geniuses? Returning to that, while online courses are growing in popularity, the grand experiment that was the introduction of the internet tells us that access to information counts for little in producing geniuses. Perhaps almost nothing. As great as YouTube math tutorials are, they themselves haven't triggered a golden age of mathematicians. Instead, what's necessary for genius historically is early engagement with not access to intellectual subjects. And for humans, engagement is a social phenomenon. Social phenomenon, particularly for children. This requires interactions with adults who cannot just give them individual attention, but also model for them what serious intellectual engagement looks like. Think of how influential the in his 20s Max Tolman must have seen to a preteen Einstein, handing him great books by the likes of Spinoza and Euclid. Could you hire a Max Tolman for your own family? I can certainly imagine a startup specializing in online aristocratic tutoring. That's true. That would be nice. Geared not towards college tests or college resume padding, but towards fundamentals, completely orthogonal to the norm of academic mass production. This would actually fit in with some of the other recent movements, like the slow food movement. There has already been a significant rise in homeschooling and even unschooling, which sounds like something that could, in some cases, essentially be parental-driven aristocratic tutoring. If for such a startup, the problem is obvious. Tutoring highlights economic privilege. And as Tocqueville pointed out, the rejection of aristocracy is the foundation of the American ethos. It's telling that I felt uncomfortable writing this essay, despite being confident it's true. So if you reach out, maybe they, in terms of rejection, they could help out in terms of. So maybe use empathy to reach out, be like, yo, I can't find anyone else. Use empathy. Okay, so yeah. So even if costs were reachable for the upper middle class, would such a system be allowed to exist? Not everything improves with time. There are a number of things that people did better in the past, both because of lost wisdom, but also because in the past things weren't mass-produced. Beautiful dirt dresses, hand-stitched rugs, even kitchen appliances used to be sturdier and last longer, and it's still like getting good. You can go purchase a mass-produced cheap samurai sword online, but you'd be a fool to use it in a fight against bladed 20 times folded steel, even if the later were ancient. Stradivari violins, handcrafted by members of the Italian Stradivari family, are legendarily considered to have a superior and unique sound compared to violins made with even the most modern techniques. Child going from governesses teaching them multiple languages to renowned scholars tutoring them in advanced mathematics is simply child going from governesses teaching them multiple languages to renowned scholars teaching them in advanced mathematics is similarly not replicable in today's world. In turning education into a system of mass production, a we created a superbly democratic system that made the majority of people and the world as a whole much better off. It is the right decision, but we lost the most elegant and beautiful minds. Those mentos, wow, Stradivari, who were created by an artisanal process. That's a really beautiful line. Maybe. Could AI help this process? Use it? The unfortunate consequence is that, in a very real sense, our intellectual culture is filled with figures who are essentially mass produced ersatz, knockoffs of their aristocratic forebears. They're of decent quality, they serve their purpose, and boy, they sure were cheap to produce. But I don't think they have quite the same sound. This is part one in the aristocratic tutoring series and was followed up by objections to the importance of aristocratic tutoring. Part two. Part three explores the day-to-day schedule of aristocratic tutoring and how geniuses used to be raised. Recently, I've been doing some tutoring myself with my own child, and for the results, please check out how I taught my 3-year-old to read like a 9-year-old. So this does exist, tripling reading level through tutoring. Very interesting. Governesses seem like an ignored part of historical history. They often aren't explicitly referred to as tutoring, but acted precisely as such, especially for the earliest portions of education, like learning languages. And governesses were even more universal than tutors among the aristocrats, who would eventually become geniuses of the day. Descartes' death by tutoring was nowhere near the top of the ignorable deaths of scholars, that is reserved for those who died fired clotions, fired dogs. Jean-Jacques Rousseau was knocked over by a rambunctious greyhound. Kurt Vonnegut, decades after surviving the firebombing of Dresden, was tripped when a small dog wound its leash around his legs. But Francis Bacon outdid them all, famously dying from his trying to stuff a dead chicken with snow. Interesting. Even Hannah Arendt's lovers acted as aristocratic tutors while still a young college student. Arendt had an affair with her professor, the philosopher Martin Heidegger, which she perhaps purposely described as the blessing of my life. Apparently, Arendt was to Heidegger a young, beautiful woman who could follow the complicated paths of his thought. He was to her an initiation into existential philosophy and the life of the mind. That's actually very interesting. Perhaps the super rich still do aristocratic tutoring in secret. It turns out that these were mostly, again, interventions. If we look at the most expensive tutor, the tutor he placed for $400,000 a year was for a rich family in the West Coast. The student was having trouble with school and with substance use, so the tutor had to homeschool. Yeah, so it's just like discussing how tutoring is very important, and that geniuses can be produced. In this day and AI age, then may as well for the next 3 hours dive deep into it, try to tutor myself. Yeah, there's not much more to say to summarize. Like, there's a lot of figures in history who were evidently historical figures or geniuses, and they were tutored. So then find some tutoring. Yeah, mentorship or whatever kind. Stream and